Rome Stadio Olimpico, July 4th, 1997. The air was thick with anticipation, hovering over the crowd like an invisible cloud, almost tangible in its intensity. 50,000 people had gathered in this massive arena, their collective breath creating a low, continuous hum that seemed to vibrate through the ancient Italian soil beneath their feet. The History World Tour had already established itself as perhaps the most ambitious concert series ever mounted, an unprecedented global spectacle that would eventually reach over 4 million fans across 35 countries. But tonight in Rome felt different. Those who had been following the tour, journalists, die-hard fans who traveled from city to city, even crew members, would later remark that there was something special in the atmosphere of the Eternal City that evening. Perhaps it was the way the setting Mediterranean sun had painted the sky in dramatic shades of amber and crimson before yielding to darkness. Perhaps it was the historic weight of the venue itself, a coliseum of modern times that seemed to connect present to past through some mysterious cultural osmosis. Or perhaps it was simply the unique chemistry that sometimes emerges when the right performer meets the right audience on the right night. That rare, ephemeral magic that transforms a concert from entertainment into something approaching religious experience. Whatever the cause, as the massive digital countdown clock on the towering stage began its final sequence, 10, 9, 8, 50,000 voices joined in, counting down in a dozen different languages but unified in their expectation. The anticipation had been building for hours, but now, in these final seconds, it crystallized into a physical force. 765. The volume increased with each descending number, a crescendo of human voices that seemed to compress the very air in the stadium. 4, 3, 2. And then, for one perfect moment as the counter hit 1, absolute silence. 50,000 people held their breath together, creating a vacuum of sound so complete that many would later swear they could hear their own heartbeats. The explosion that followed was sensory overload by design, a precisely choreographed assault on every human perception. Jets of flame erupted from the stage, their heat palpable even to fans in the distant upper tiers. Lasers sliced through the darkness in geometric patterns so complex they seemed to defy physics. The sound hit like a physical wave, the opening notes of Scream at a volume that vibrated internal organs. And then, rocketing upward from beneath the stage, emerging from a cloud of theatrical smoke like an apparition made material, there was Michael. His silhouette was unmistakable, lean and coiled with potential energy, instantly recognizable to anyone who had lived through the past 2 decades of popular culture. He was dressed in a futuristic platinum and black military-style outfit, its metallic elements catching and reflecting the cascade of lights that surrounded him. The roar that greeted his appearance was primal and deafening, the sound of tens of thousands of people experiencing collective catharsis. Many were weeping openly, overwhelmed by the physical presence of a figure who had existed for them primarily through recordings and videos, now suddenly, shockingly real before them. Michael stood motionless for several beats, absorbing the energy directed at him from all sides of the stadium, his face partially obscured by sunglasses despite the evening hour. Then, with a single, sharp movement of his head, a gesture so small yet so precisely executed that it was visible even to those watching from hundreds of meters away, he broke his stillness and the performance truly began. What followed was Michael at the height of his powers, a masterclass in total performance that integrated dance, music, and visual spectacle into a seamless whole. His voice, sometimes criticized in later years, was strong and clear that night, hitting notes with a precision that silenced doubters. His dancing was beyond description, movements that seemed to break free from the normal constraints of human physicality, creating visual poetry through the language of the body. The audience responded in kind, their energy matching his, creating that rare, perfect circuit of giving and receiving that defines the greatest of live performances. The concert progressed through Michael's extraordinary catalog of hits, each song triggering waves of recognition and joy that washed visibly through the massive crowd. from the driving beat of "Wanna Be Startin' Something" to the pure pop perfection of "The Way You Make Me Feel," from the rock edge of Black or White to the emotional depth of Earth Song. The setlist was a journey through not just a career, but an era, a soundtrack to the lives of the tens of thousands who sang along with every word. The production was flawless, a testament to the hundreds of technicians, musicians, dancers, and crew members who made such spectacle possible night after night. Yet for all its technical perfection, what made the performance transcendent was the humanity at its center. Michael's unerring ability to make each person in that massive space feel individually seen and connected. It was during Man in the Mirror, approximately two-thirds through the show, that the incident occurred. The song had always been an emotional high point of Michael's concerts, its message of personal responsibility and collective change resonating deeply with audiences worldwide. That night in Rome was no exception, with the crowd swaying in unison, many holding lighters aloft in what was then still the traditional concert gesture of solidarity. Michael was fully immersed in the performance, his eyes closed as he hit the emotional crescendo of the song, his body language conveying complete surrender to the music. Security for the History Tour was legendary in its thoroughness, a necessary precaution for a performer of Michael's stature. Multiple cordons of guards stood between the audience and the stage itself was elevated several meters above the field level, making unauthorized access seemingly impossible. Yet somehow, in a lapse that would later lead to the firing of several security personnel, a young man managed to breach every barrier. Later investigation would reveal him to be Massimo Torini, a 26-year-old factory worker from Milan with a history of mental health issues and an obsession with Michael that had consumed his life for years. How he managed to evade the multiple layers of security remains debated to this day. Though most accounts suggest a combination of careful planning, timing his move during a moment when guards were distracted by a medical emergency elsewhere in the crowd, and sheer determination born of psychological fixation. The first indication that something was wrong came from the musicians, who noticed movement in their peripheral vision where there should have been none. Then came a ripple of reaction from the front rows of the audience, a change in the quality of their attention. Eyes widening, fingers pointing, expressions shifting from rapture to concern. Michael, deep in the emotional landscape of the song, was the last to become aware of the intruder's presence. Torini moved with surprising speed across the massive stage, his trajectory aimed directly at Michael. Later footage analysis would clock the entire incident at just under 12 seconds from the moment Torini became visible on stage to its resolution, a near-infinitesimal slice of time that would nonetheless become one of the most analyzed moments in live performance history. In those 12 seconds, multiple realities seemed to unfold simultaneously. The security team, finally alerted to the breach, began their response, with guards sprinting from the wings toward the center stage. The band, professionals to their core, never missed a note, though their eyes tracked the intruder with growing alarm. The backing singers faltered briefly before recovering, their voices momentarily drowned by the collective gasp from 50,000 witnesses. And Michael, turning at last to the source of the disturbance, found himself face to face with Massimo Torini, a stranger whose mind had constructed an elaborate relationship with a person he had never met. What happened next would be described in dozens of languages across global media, would be captured on hundreds of cameras from nearly every angle, would be replayed on news broadcasts and analyzed by psychologists and security experts. Yet for all this documentation, those who were physically present in Stadio Olimpico that night would insist that recordings failed to capture the true emotional impact of the moment. As Torini reached Michael, security still several crucial steps behind, the man did not attempt violence as many feared. Instead, he fell to his knees before his idol, his body racked with sobs so intense they were visible throughout the stadium. In his hand was not a weapon, but a small, crudely wrapped package, which he thrust upward toward Michael in a gesture simultaneously demanding and supplicating. Time seemed to slow and stretch in that moment. The backing track of Man in the Mirror continued, now eerily appropriate as soundtrack to the unfolding human drama. The security team was mere seconds from reaching the intruder, their expressions grim and focused. 50,000 spectators held a collective breath, the moment suspended between potential disaster and possible redemption. In that stretched second, Michael Jackson made a decision that would define not just the remainder of that concert, but would become one of the most discussed moments of his later career. With a small, subtle gesture of his hand, so understated that many missed it at first, he signaled the approaching security guards to stop. They hesitated, trained to prioritize his safety above all else. But something in his expression made them hold their position, poised just meters away, ready to intervene in an instant if needed. Michael then did the completely unexpected. He knelt down to meet Torini at eye level. The music faded slightly as the sound engineer made a split-second mixing decision, sensing the significance of what was unfolding. In the relative quiet that followed, though no microphone captured it, those nearest the stage could hear Michael's voice, soft but clear. "It's okay. I'm here. I see you." The impact of that simple human connection on Massimo Torini was immediate and profound. His sobbing intensified, but its quality changed from the desperation of obsession to the release of being truly seen. He pressed the small package into Michael's hands, speaking rapidly in a mixture of broken English and Italian that few could understand. Michael listened with complete attention, his focus entirely on the troubled young man before him, as if the 50,000 watching eyes had disappeared, as if they were alone in a private moment rather than at the center of a global spectacle. Those closest to the stage would later report that Michael's eyes filled with tears as he listened, though whether from empathy for Torini's evident distress or from some private resonance with the young man's words, none could say with certainty. After what seemed both an eternity and an instant, Michael helped Torini to his feet. With one arm around the young man's shoulders, he turned to face the audience, who had remained in stunned silence. Then, with his free hand, Michael carefully unwrapped the small package Torini had brought him. Inside was a child's drawing, clearly preserved for many years, its colors faded but still discernible. A crayon portrait of Michael himself, drawn with the loving inaccuracy of a young child. Beside him on the crude drawing were stick figures of a woman and a small boy. As Michael held up the drawing for the crowd to see, Torini spoke again, this time loudly enough for his voice to carry beyond the stage. "My mother," he said in halting English, "she loved you. She died. Cancer. I was 10. Your music," his voice broke. "Only time I see her smile." At the end, the stadium remained in perfect silence, 50,000 people collectively holding their breath as they witnessed not just a security incident, but a moment of raw human vulnerability. If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more rare and powerful moments from Michael's extraordinary life. Each like and subscription helps us continue bringing these meaningful stories that show the true heart behind the legend. Michael stood still for a moment, the child's drawing held carefully in his hands, his other arm still supporting Torini, whose body had begun to tremble visibly with emotion. Then Michael did something that no security protocol or performance contingency had anticipated. He turned to his musical director and made a subtle gesture, one that the band, having worked with him for years, immediately understood. The backing track for "Man in the Mirror" faded completely, replaced by a gentle piano introduction that the audience recognized with a collective murmur of emotion. It was "Heal the World," a song Michael had not included in that night's set list, a late substitution born entirely of the moment. Michael guided Torini gently to the side of the stage, where security personnel waited, now understanding their role was to care for rather than remove the young man. As Torini was led away, treated with dignity rather than force, Michael returned to center stage. The drawing was still in his hand as he began to sing, his voice carrying clearly through the perfect acoustics of Stadio Olimpico. The performance that followed would later be described by music critics as perhaps the most genuine and emotionally raw of Michael's entire career. There was a quality to his voice that transcended technique, a humanity that reached beyond the notes themselves to touch something universal. As the song progressed, Michael made his way to the thrust stage that extended into the audience, bringing him closer to the fans. He knelt there, still holding Torini's childhood drawing, and in a moment of spontaneous connection, reached out to touch the hands of those in the front row. The gesture spread organically through the stadium, fans linking hands with those beside them, until 50,000 people were physically connected in a human chain that transcended language, nationality, and the barriers that typically separate performer from audience. The moment transformed what had already been an extraordinary concert into something approaching the transcendent. Witnesses would later struggle to find adequate words for the atmosphere in Stadio Olimpico, reaching for terms like collective catharsis and secular spirituality, yet still feeling they had failed to capture the essence of what had occurred. What was clear to all present was that they had witnessed not just an expertly delivered performance, but a genuine human moment, a window into the soul of a performer whose global fame had often made such glimpses rare and precious. As Heal the World concluded, there was no immediate applause, no eruption of cheering. Instead, a profound silence fell over the stadium, tens of thousands of people collectively processing the emotional journey they had just shared. It was Michael himself who broke the silence, his voice soft yet somehow carrying to every corner of the massive space. "Every single one of you," he said, "carries something beautiful, something that can heal, something that can change the world." He looked down at the child's drawing still in his hand. Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we need someone to remind us. Only then did the applause begin, starting slowly and building to a thunderous roar that seemed to physically shake the ancient ground of Rome. Many in the audience were openly weeping, not from the typical excitement of a concert experience, but from a deeper emotional place, a recognition of shared humanity that transcended the usual boundaries between celebrity and fan. The remainder of the concert maintained this heightened emotional quality, each song seeming to take on new depths of meaning in the context of what had occurred. Michael performed with a freedom and joy that many longtime observers noted was reminiscent of his earlier years, before the weight of global fame and constant scrutiny had altered his public persona. It was as if the unexpected moment of genuine human connection had temporarily lifted some invisible burden, allowing glimpses of the unguarded artist beneath the carefully constructed icon. In the days that followed, the incident would become global news, analyzed and interpreted through countless lenses. Security experts criticized the breach while grudgingly admiring Michael's handling of a potentially dangerous situation. Mental health advocates pointed to the moment as an example of compassionate response to psychological distress. Cultural critics wrote lengthy essays about the nature of celebrity worship and the complex relationship between artists and their audiences. But perhaps most significantly, Massimo Torini himself became part of the narrative. Rather than being vilified or simply forgotten after his 15 minutes of notoriety, his story emerged as central to understanding the full significance of what had transpired in Rome that night. Journalists tracked him to the small psychiatric facility where he had been taken after the concert. Not arrested, but provided with the care he had long needed yet never received. In interviews, facility staff reported that Torini kept repeating a single phrase: "He saw me. He really saw me." What emerged from these investigations was a story both ordinary in its outlines and extraordinary in its culmination. Torini had indeed lost his mother to cancer when he was 10 years old. The same year, Thriller had become a global phenomenon. In the months of her illness, Michael's music had provided rare moments of joy in their home, a temporary escape from the grim reality of terminal disease. The crayon drawing had been made during that period, a child's representation of the fantasy that his musical hero might somehow save his dying mother. After her death, Torini's life had taken a series of downward turns. An absent father, inadequate social support, the onset of mental health issues that went largely untreated. His fixation on Michael had grown from a child's normal celebrity admiration into something more consuming, a psychological displacement that located all hope for healing in the distant figure of a man he had never met. The most unexpected development came 3 days after the concert, when Michael Jackson, having completed his scheduled performance in Milan, made an unannounced visit to the facility where Torini was being treated. No cameras were present, a rarity for a figure whose every movement was typically documented, and accounts of what transpired come only from facility staff and Torini himself. According to these sources, Michael spent over an hour with the young man, listening to his story in full. Before leaving, he made arrangements to cover the cost of 2 years of comprehensive psychiatric treatment and rehabilitation services, with the only condition being that this financial support remain anonymous. He also left Torini with a signed photograph, not of himself, but of Torini's childhood drawing, which Michael had carefully preserved. On the back, he had written a simple message: "Your mother's smile lives in the joy you bring to others." Now it's your turn to heal. The Rome incident, as it came to be known, marked a turning point not just for Massimo Torini, but for Michael Jackson himself. In subsequent performances on the History Tour, witnesses noted a subtle but significant shift in his stage presence, a new quality of openness, a willingness to allow more unscripted moments of connection with his audiences. The wall of perfectionism that had characterized his performances for so many years, the flawless execution that had become both his signature and, perhaps, his prison, seemed to have developed small, deliberate cracks, windows through which more authentic exchange could occur. During the tour's final dates in South Africa, he began incorporating a new segment into the show, a moment of guided silence in which he asked audiences to hold in their hearts whoever had first connected them to music. It was a direct echo of his experience with Torini, an acknowledgement of the deep emotional roots that often underlie our relationship with art. For Massimo Torini, the path forward was neither simple nor straight. 2 years of intensive treatment helped address his underlying psychological issues, and the stability provided by Michael's anonymous financial support allowed him to rebuild his life in gradual, sustainable ways. By 2001, he had returned to work, now employed as a music teacher in a small elementary school outside Rome. In a single interview granted to an Italian newspaper on the 5th anniversary of the concert, he reflected on his moment of infamy with remarkable insight. "I was looking for something impossible, for Michael to bring back what I had lost. What I found instead was myself. He didn't give me what I wanted. He gave me what I needed, to be seen, truly seen in all my brokenness." Torini's story became quietly influential in Italian mental health circles, an example of how compassionate response to psychological crisis could open doors to genuine healing. The child's drawing that had catalyzed the entire incident found its way to a permanent place of honor. When the History Tour, Artifacts and Memories exhibition opened at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland in 2003, visitors found the crayon artwork displayed in a central position, protected by museum-quality glass but deliberately placed at child's eye level. The accompanying plaque contained no mention of Torini's name or the dramatic circumstances under which Michael had received it. Instead, it simply read, "Sometimes the greatest gifts come from unexpected moments. MJ." Visitors to the exhibition often reported being moved to tears by the simple drawing, not knowing its full story, but somehow sensing its significance. Parents would often find their children drawn to it specifically, standing before the faded crayon lines with unusual attention and stillness, perhaps recognizing in its imperfect lines their own artistic efforts, perhaps sensing some deeper resonance in this evidence that even the greatest of stars could be touched by a child's creation. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful moments that reveal the true heart behind Michael Jackson's legendary career. Your engagement helps us continue to share these remarkable stories with fans around the world. In the years that followed, as Michael's public life became increasingly complicated by legal troubles and health issues, the Rome incident would be referenced repeatedly by those who sought to defend his essential character. "Remember Rome," his supporters would say, pointing to that moment of genuine compassion under the most unpredictable circumstances as evidence of his true nature. And while such moments cannot and should not erase legitimate questions or concerns, they do add necessary dimension to any honest portrait of a complex human being. Today, more than 2 decades later, Visitors to a small music classroom in the outskirts of Rome might notice an unassuming middle-aged teacher who shows remarkable patience with his least talented students. They might see how he emphasizes not technical perfection, but emotional expression, how he celebrates small breakthroughs with disproportionate joy. What they would not know, unless they recognize his name from an incident long faded from public memory, is that Massimo Torini carries with him every day the lesson he learned on that stage in Stadio Olimpico, that being truly seen, even for a moment, can change a life forever. And in a locked drawer in his desk, taken out only on the most difficult days, is a photograph of a child's drawing and the message that continues to guide his life's work. Your mother's smile lives in the joy you bring to others. Now it's your turn to heal. Perhaps this, ultimately, is Michael Jackson's most enduring legacy. Not the record-breaking sales or the revolutionary videos or even the musical innovations, but those moments when the humanity beneath the icon shone through with such brightness that it illuminated not just his own true nature, but the possibility of genuine connection in a world that so often settles for the superficial. And perhaps that explains why, all these years later, we continue to revisit these stories, seeking in them some reflection of our own deepest longing. To see and be seen, to touch and be touched, to recognize in each other the fragile, beautiful humanity that unites us all.